Thank you so much for that welcome, and you're right, Teresa, we know each other for many years that we will keep just to ourselves. Quelle superbe salle, quel formidable programme.
We are meeting in a splendid room. We have a beautiful program. Thank you very much for inviting us here today. Obviously, Teresa and myself have children aged the same. So this morning, everything was chaos. I said to the children, I have to leave early because I have a speech to give you this morning. And my son, my 16-year-old son, asked me what this was all about. And I said it was privacy and information technology. And my son said, but that's an easy topic. I said to my son, this will be easy for me because I know how to raise the questions. But you from the universities and from other sectors will have to answer these questions during the next months and years.
We are delighted that you responded to our call for proposals to host the Pathways to Privacy Symposium this year, and we congratulate the Center for an excellent job in putting together such a stellar program on such a foundational theme. Comme vous le savez, le programme.
As you well know, we celebrated our 10th year anniversary this year, and we have gone through our second 5-year evaluation.
Interested in reading it, but in short, I'm happy to relay a few key findings. The evaluation of the program concluded that it continues to address a demonstrated need, given its unique niche in promoting privacy issues and the universal support of those consulted. It's aligned with the OPC role and responsibilities and priorities and meets the intent of PIPADA, the Personal Information Protection Electronic Documents Act. It's directly aligned with the OPC's priorities. It enhances both the production and sharing of privacy knowledge and best practices. And since the evaluation of last time, there has been a greater diversity of projects funded across priority areas and recipient groups, as well as more knowledge translation activities. The program is seen to be efficient, with a high level of project output for the funds invested, producing good value for money. And for all of this, I would like to thank the wonderful team at the office that have shepherded this program and led this program for many years, namely François Cadieux, our program manager, who's here today and whom many of you have the direct contact with in terms of your ongoing projects and your ongoing work. So thank you to François, Melissa, Barb, if you're here, and the rest of the team for your incredible leadership of this program. Among the recommendations going forward are to continue to translate research into results and encourage innovative partnerships to extend the reach of the program. So it's precisely in that spirit that we initiated the P2P, Pathways to Privacy Symposium, 3 years ago, with the following objectives in mind. First, to showcase the results of research projects funded by the OPC and other relevant funders. To facilitate dialogue between those who do the research and those who apply it. And to provide an opportunity for researchers and other stakeholders themselves to network and build future partnerships. After having organized and hosted it the first year, we thought who best to carry out this initiative and continue bringing it forward, improving on the model, than the research community itself. And since then, we've dedicated a special portion of our research funding envelope for this annual research symposium. Last year, the successful applicant was the University of Toronto, and this year, here we are at the University of Ottawa under the leadership of the Centre. Going forward, we are considering expanding the call for P2P proposals to invite not only original ideas for future symposia, but other creative modes of research translation and dissemination as well. So we certainly welcome your thoughts and your ideas on how we can best do that. Le retour au principe premier de la protection de la vie.
A return to first principles for privacy at the cutting edge. What a beautiful theme.
Timely, compelling, and apropos topic for discussion. You are absolutely right to encourage this kind of thoughtful reflection in a time of such rapid, game-changing technological developments. For some time now, we've also been thinking about this conversation that needs to happen, and we're delighted, all my OPC colleagues and I who are here today, to be able to take part in your discussions. To get things started, let me share with you a few musings of my own. When we think of first principles, a good starting point is always the Supreme Court of Canada decision in R versus Diamond. There, the court adopted a categorization of privacy claims from the 1972 Department of Justice Task Force Report on Privacy in Computers, which continues to be a helpful analytical tool in parsing out the underlying principles and interests at stake. The court, as you all know, spoke of three realms or zones of privacy: territorial, personal, and informational privacy. It's this third realm, informational privacy, that was the subject of a more recent Supreme Court of Canada decision in R versus Spencer. The court recognized three conceptually distinct, though overlapping understandings of informational privacy, as they've evolved over the past 2.5 decades of Supreme Court jurisprudence. The first conception of informational privacy is concerned with confidentiality or secrecy, which inheres in the nature of a relationship between parties, such as the doctor-patient relationship. And such was the concept of informational privacy at the heart of McInerney versus MacDonald, for example. The second is Alan Weston's concept of control underlying the individual's claim to determine for themselves when, how, and to what extent information about them is communicated to others. This claim is based on the assumption that all information about a person is in a fundamental way his own, for him to communicate or retain for himself as he sees fit. And the court cited here as examples its earlier decision in R versus Diamond and R versus Duarte. But then the court went on to articulate a third notion of informational privacy as anonymity, where information is willingly communicated to others, but on the basis that it will not be identified with the person communicating it. Though not a novel concept, anonymity was described as particularly important in the age of the Internet. I'm quoting here, "Anonymity permits individuals to act in public places, but to preserve freedom from identification and surveillance." The court referred to its earlier decision in R versus Wise on the ubiquitous monitoring of vehicles on public highways, although it also seemed to have planted the seed for this analysis, in my view, more recently in United Foods and Commercial Workers Union, when it recognized that individuals do not automatically forfeit their privacy interests when they step out in public. R versus Spencer was a high watermark for privacy in Canada, tying together years of past jurisprudence into the most coherent and nuanced understanding of informational privacy yet, moving the yardstick significantly forward in the modern age of the Internet. However, given the theme of today's symposium, urging us to return to first principles for privacy at the cutting edge, I'd like to posit that even this most recent expression of informational privacy may not yet be complete, and that looming ahead is a further conception of informational privacy just waiting to be explored and articulated. To make my point, let me take you there intuitively through the use of several examples: online reputation, big data, and wearable computing. The longevity of personal information we ourselves post online or others post about us for anyone to see, for any purpose and forever, is driving us to see and think about privacy in different ways. The implications of this new phenomenon are starting to settle in, with jurisdictions struggling to consider the emergence of new claims for the right to be forgotten. Now, one could argue that underlying the right to be forgotten is still the concept of informational privacy as control, essentially an individual's claim to determine for themselves how, when, and to what extent information about them is communicated to others. But is it really? The recent Google Spain decision of the European Court of Justice is instructive in this regard. The case involved a complaint made by a Spanish national to a Spanish data protection authority against a Spanish newspaper, La Vanguardia, as well as Google. The individual complained that when he searched his name using Google's search engine, he obtained links to 2 newspaper articles published in 1998 concerning a forced sale of property he owned in order to recover unpaid Social Security debts. He maintained that the issue of his unpaid debts had now been fully resolved, and the information contained in the articles, while accurate, had become irrelevant with the passage of time. And the complainant requested that the newspaper remove the articles and that Google be required to prevent the articles from being returned in its search results. In a decision rendered in last May, the European Court of Justice did not order the newspaper to remove the original articles from its website, but did order Google and other search engines to remove links from search results upon request where the information, even if originally accurate, had become inadequate, irrelevant, or excessive. Such requests could be refused, however, depending on the sensitivity of the information and the public interest in having access to it. So when viewed from our own legal construct of informational privacy, what privacy claim lies at the root of this decision? Certainly not confidentiality, since the forced property sale had been originally publicized pursuant to an order of the Ministry of Labor and Social Affairs. Anonymity neither, it would seem, since there was no request for a publication ban. Privacy as control does not seem to be completely operative either, given that there was never any dispute over the accuracy of the personal information at issue. It was what it was, and the court did not accept the complainant's claim for complete control over the destiny of the information by deleting the original articles per se. What then was the operating principle that led the European Court of Justice to find that it was the search engine's relentless recall and dissemination of the personal information, as opposed to its original publication, which offended the complainant's privacy? Big data. Probably the biggest test to first privacy principles has come with the growth of big data. Big data is the massive aggregation of data combined with powerful algorithms and computing power to identify patterns, draw correlations, and make inferences that can predict future behavior. Big data challenges our known conceptions of informational privacy in fundamental ways. Proponents of big data claim that informational control in the form of consent is not meaningful or even possible, given the sheer volume of data that is amassed, and that having to specify or limit future purposes to obtain informed consent is inimical to the very benefits big data are intended to realize. They also argue that data are drawn from public sources or online activities which are non-confidential in nature and are often non-personally identifiable. An earlier precursor to some of these big data questions came to our office a few years ago in the form of a complaint against an organization that produced and sold customized consumer lists to third-party businesses for direct marketing purposes based on select criteria. Teresa will know which case I'm talking about. Their business model at the time was to combine publicly available white pages information about individuals, their last name, sometimes their first name or initial, their address, telephone number, with full postal codes. To combine that with aggregate geodemographic data about the surrounding neighborhood or the census dissemination area obtained from Statistics Canada, which included things like average age, type of home, whether it's a single or multi-dwelling, the estimated income, estimated home value. Moreover, using name tables and proprietary models based on genealogical regression analyses, the company would impute gender, ethnicity, and religion based on last names. After quite an in-depth investigation of the technology and the methodology used at the time, the then Assistant Commissioner found that the White Pages data, even when combined with this geodemographic data about the surrounding neighborhood's general characteristics, which may or may not be accurately attributed to the individual, did not convert the publicly available information into personal information attracting consent requirements under PIPEDA. In this case, the data clearly were not confidential or anonymous. Moreover, given the publicly available nature of the information, the complainant's claim of privacy control, which would have required consent for use or disclosure of the individual's personal information, could not hold, and the complaint was not well-founded. Notwithstanding this finding, there remained a strong intuitive unease with the company's practice of imputing gender, religion, and ethnicity to individuals based on their names and all the associated assumptions and inferences therewith, which we simply could not get at using existing legal constructs. A more recent example helps press the point a little further. According to a 2013 study led by Harvard University professor Latanya Sweeney on discrimination in online ad delivery, racial bias was found in ads connected with certain search terms used in major search engines. When searching Black identifying first names, such as Deshaun, Darnell, or Jermaine, a higher percentage of ads offering services for criminal record checks appeared than was the case when searching white identifying names like Brad, Jill, or Emma. Even conceding momentarily that control, confidentiality, and anonymity are not operative privacy interests in this context because the practice does not involve personal information per se. What other privacy interest or claim, if any, is engaged by the intuitive feeling we get about its morally reprehensive nature? Why are we offended not only by the inferences being drawn from the racial profiles of others, but also by the assumptions being attributed to our own interests and intentions based on our search queries? It's my third example of wearable computing. The advent of wearable computing and sensors has opened up vast opportunities to extract and transmit personal information about our bodies on an ongoing basis and link it with other online and offline information about us. Early adopters of this technology have enthusiastically vested themselves with such devices for medical, recreational, convenience, or personal safety purposes. But these devices also represent highly lucrative opportunities to commercialize and sell our bodily data to third parties for marketing or even insurance purposes. Even assuming individuals' consent is truly informed and meaningful, at what point do our bodies become so commodified and objectified that control over the information begins to give way to another, more operative privacy interest? There are analogous instances in other domains where we have established legal and ethical limits to consent, and we have readily accepted such outer limits. For instance, we have as a society agreed to ban commercial surrogacy, prohibiting any form of payment other than for reimbursement of expenses. Ethical frameworks we have constructed to regulate research activities in Canada likewise prohibit payment of research participants other than for reimbursement of expenses. Now, it's true, perhaps these examples have been rightly justified in the interest of preserving bodily integrity. But even if we assume that wearable computing and body sensors do not physically interfere with our bodily integrity per se, does the constant emission of our body-related data to others for commercial exploit not begin to intuitively offend some other underlying principle? What I think these and several other examples, many of you in the room can certainly think about, at the cutting edge of technology, drive us to consider is a possible fourth conception of informational privacy, looming in the background. Increasingly, the concept of dignity is entering the lexicon of privacy debates, but has yet to be recognized and fully articulated as a principle of informational privacy. With the advent of the internet, big data, and wearable computing, to name just a few examples of my own, our traditional concepts of informational privacy are being stretched, and it may be time to consider, maybe intuitively at first, and then more systematically, what other underlying claims or interests are being engaged in this new age of information technology. Now, I'm conscious of legitimate concerns raised by some American authors like Omer Tene and Jules Polonetsky, who guard against privacy policy becoming muddled with peripheral or even conflicting considerations, they say, no less important, even if theoretically distinct from core privacy interests. Though I wonder whether these concerns are really at their source a matter of preserving conceptual integrity, or whether they're simply rooted in a long-standing cultural perspective that has led to a particular way of seeing and understanding privacy. Comparative law scholars like James Whitman have gone to great lengths in contrasting the American understanding of privacy based on values of liberty and autonomy with the European experience that has tended to approach privacy more as a matter of dignity, honor, and respect. And as typical Canadians, with both common law and civilist traditions, we tend to straddle somewhere in between, although we will have important legal and policy choices to make at the crossroads in the coming years. The emergence of new technologies is pushing our traditional conceptions of privacy more than ever, and you are very wise to have conceived today's theme in such a way as to encourage us to return to first principles for privacy at the cutting edge. And with these few opening remarks, I look forward to hearing your thoughts and taking part in discussions over the course of the day, and perhaps we can look forward to seeing some research proposals on these and other fundamental questions in next year's call. Merci beaucoup.